Welcome back, members. I understand that some members are having issues with regard the connection to the meeting, and they're trying to be resolved. So hopefully we can move forward. I would like to welcome councillors to this virtual meeting of the BCP Council and to press and members of the public who are viewing via the live stream. I will now set out the housekeeping arrangements for the meeting. Please note that this meeting is being recorded by the Council for live and subsequent broadcast and will be published on the Council website for a minimum of 6 months. In order to ensure the meeting is managed effectively, please could everyone follow these ground rules for speaking. Only speak when invited by me as the chairman to do so. State your name before you speak if you have not been introduced by name. Some people may need to dial into the meeting and therefore will not have the benefit of the video. Please mute your microphone when you are not speaking. If you would like to speak, please type RTS, request to speak, in the instant message conversation panel on the left-hand side of your screen and click the arrow button to send. Please note this panel is visible to all parties. If you would like to raise a point of order, please type PO, point of order, in the instant message conversation panel. Where there appears to be a consensus in the meeting for the motion, I will ask if there is any dissension from the motion. If you wish to vote against the motion, please type against in the instant message conversation panel. Otherwise, the motion will be agreed without a vote. When a formal vote is required, this will be carried out by a roll call, asking for a response of for or against, or abstain by each councillor. A recorded vote requires support from a quarter of the members present. If a request for a recorded vote is made, unless I have already received a notification of the request and 25% of the meeting have already intimated that they are in support, a roll call will be taken up to the point that a quarter of councillors present at the meeting support that request. If my connection is lost during the meeting, the Vice Chairman will take the chair until my connection resumes. Finally, please ensure background noise is kept to a minimum as far as possible, and mobile phones and other devices are switched to silent for the duration of the meeting. Item 1, members, apologies for absence. Can I ask the Chief Executive to report any apologies?
I've no apologies reported as yet, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett. Agenda item 2, members. Chief Executive, can you report on any declarations of interest received, please?
Thank you, Chairman. I believe that Councillor Mike Brooke wishes to declare an interest as a member of Bournemouth Development Company.
Councillor Brooke.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just get the video up. Yes, I'd like to declare a local interest with reference to item 6 on the agenda, which is the Bournemouth Town Centre Vision Winter Gardens, as I'm the Council's representative on the board of Bournemouth Development Company.
Thank you, Councillor Brooke. Councillor Tony Trent, please. Councillor Trent.
Thank you, Chair. I'm trying to actually get the agenda, which I've managed to wipe out, so I can actually say the items, but there's some items on various developments. There's one in Kinston, and I think there's another one at Southbourne and so on, neither of which has been to planning committee, and as a member of planning committee, I cannot give any opinion or anything on it, but so I don't know what the situation is on that, but as I say, there's about 3 items, property items, that haven't gone to planning committee yet, and I'd be happy to take advice on that.
Thank you, Councillor Brooke. Mr. Farrell, are you able to advise Councillor Trent with regards to the agenda items this evening, please?
Chairman, I'm not aware of the position. I think as in terms of the council's approval for funding, etc., I don't think that conflicts with the position on the planning committee. I just think that the members would need to ensure that they don't predetermine any planning decisions through that debate. So I think there are separate issues at stake here. I don't know if anybody else has any different view on that.
Chairman, if I could give some advice.
Yes, Anne, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Let me just put my on. Excuse me. Yes, these matters are all dealing with the developments from an executive basis around the financing, and as such, all members can, unless they have got a pecuniary interest, which I'm not aware of any, all members can take part, speak and vote. Those members who sit on planning committee just need to bear in mind that their comments must show that they've not predetermined any planning matters which aren't part of these reports in any event, so it's highly unlikely that would be the case. So basically members are able to speak as long as planning members don't show themselves to have predetermined the planning issues on those matters, which, as I say, is highly unlikely because the nature of the reports are about financing the actual projects themselves. Hopefully that's nice and clear.
Thank you very much, Anne. I have a request to speak from Councillor Stephen Bartlett. Councillor Bartlett, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Sorry, I've missed the first part of the meeting because my Skype went down, but I've just come in, I think, on the tail end of an issue which I was going to declare as an interest, and that is that I'm on the planning board, and I'm aware that one of the items on the agenda is actually not yet gone through planning, but I think the clarification has just been given by the monitoring officer, so I don't think I need to pursue it anymore. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bartlett. If there are no further declarations of interest, I will then move on to item 3 of this evening's agenda.
It's so easy to bloody lose something.
Members, can you be cognizant to try and mute your microphones when you're not speaking, please?
Am I unmuted?
Thank you, Councillor Trent. Agenda item 3, confirmation of the minutes. Members, do you agree to confirm the minutes of the ordinary council meeting held on the 9th of June? Can I ask if there is any dissension from confirming those minutes, please? Please show in the sidebar. Thank you very much, members. Moving on then to agenda item 4, announcements. Members, it was with sadness that I'm reporting the recent death of Baroness Diana Maddock, former Christchurch MP, who has recently died. She had been an MP in Christchurch from 1993 to 1997, and our condolences are forwarded to her family. Also, the death of Sir John Eden, a former Bournemouth MP. Sir John has recently died and was an MP in Bournemouth from 1954 to 1983. And we'd like to also record our condolences. Moving on then to agenda item 5, public questions. In accordance with the Constitution, the public questions received from John Dobson on the Beach House, Muddyford, has been published on the website and a link circulated to all councillors. A response to this question has also been published on the council's website. Statements. In accordance with the Constitution, the statements received as follows. Susan Chapman on the climate emergency and agenda item 8. L. Carey and Mr. and Mrs. Tucknott on the housing scheme at Moorside Road. Connor Olubi on the vote of no confidence. Susan Lennon on the housing scheme at Moorside Road. Dr. Martin Price on the housing scheme at Moorside Road, Mr. Mark Chivers on the climate emergency and agenda item 8. These have all been published on the website and a link circulated to all councillors. The next item is petitions. There are no petitions have been received by the council. Agenda item 6, recommendations from Cabinet and other committees. Members, you are asked to consider the following recommendations, which will be taken separately. Item 6A is Cabinet 27th May 2020, minute number 173, the Bournemouth Town Centre Vision, TCV, Winter Garden Site Regeneration Opportunities. Councillors are advised that if they wish to discuss the detail of any of the confidential appendices relating to the recommendations on this item, the meeting will be required to move into confidential session. I would like to advise councillors that the recommendations from the Cabinet meeting, as set out on the agenda, were deferred from the last council meeting to enable consideration of the risk assessment. Councillors have received a supplementary report circulated with an agenda pack relating to the project risk register. Councillor Mark Howell, I understand you will move the recommendations in the supplementary report and the recommendations from the Cabinet meeting on the 27th of May. Councillor Howell?
Yes, thank you. Do you wish me to proceed or do you want a second at this stage?
I'm happy for you to proceed, Councillor Howell.
Yeah, well, yes, I don't propose to go into a great amount of detail because, as you quite rightly stated, this was deferred at the request of the Leader of the Opposition so that the risk register that was circulated during that meeting could be looked at in more detail by members. But the scheme is, for those people who are perhaps listening in, I'll just say a few details. In October 2015, Bournemouth Borough Council approved the Winter Garden Site Development Plan. Following 4 years of detailed design, in March 2019, BDC, the Bournemouth Development Company, which is the council's joint venture company with Morgan Sindall, secured planning permission for a £150 million residential-led mixed-use development at the site of the former Winter Gardens Concert Hall and the surrounding area. Subsequent to that, as we move towards the construction phase, the Cabinet approved the investment in the car park element and in private rented sector housing as part of the scheme, and also a contribution in terms of equity. And there are certain elements that require approval by council, which are those items listed G to I in the report. Now, we have given the Leader of the Opposition and the Chair of Overview and Scrutiny the opportunity for a briefing. They said they didn't require that. We have also answered various questions from councillors that have been submitted in the meantime. And with regard to the risk register in particular, there was one outstanding question from Councillor Bartlett, who was questioning why a consideration of joint venture partner Morgan Sindall's financial status at the moment is not considered in the risk agenda. Now, I've been informed by officers that this is the actual financial position of our partners should be considered as a strategic risk assessment within the council, a different council process essentially. And I'm sure that Councillor Bartlett, being on the Audit and Governance Committee, will be keen to progress and make sure that those risk assessments are up to date and done to his satisfaction. But for example, we just looked at some analytics data today, which suggests that Morgan Sindall are in very good standing in relation to their peers. You know, In-Front Analytics, for example, rates them on a score of 6 out of 10, where 10 is good. And as I say, there's commentary on there which says that is, you know, that they're a lead. They essentially offer that is very good for that industry. There have been some queries about space standards for this project. This, of course, is an inherited scheme for BCP Council and the current administration. As a consequence, although I believe it to be a very good scheme and something that will benefit Bournemouth and the wider conurbation, but particularly Bournemouth town centre, with the additional people that will be living in that area and the additional money that will be spending in the town centre, it still is a scheme that has evolved over a number of years with different administrations, and we need to bear this in mind when looking now at this point of time as to whether, you know, it's an ideal scheme. But the nature of this regeneration is it's very long term, and it needs a consistent approach from successor councils. And I think that when we look at things like space standards going forward, it's very important that all councillors are involved in looking at the pros and cons of setting space standards for the developers, and that we work together on a cross-party basis to generate a regeneration plan that we have confidence in and investors have confidence in for the future. So I'll just leave it there.
Thank you, Councillor Howe. I understand you have a seconder in Councillor Brown. Councillor David Brown, please.
Yes, Chair, I'm happy to second the report, and I may speak depending on the debate.
Thank you very much. I've received a request to speak from Councillor Broadhead. Councillor Broadhead, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. As Councillor Howell pointed out, this has been through the Overview and Scrutiny Board. The Overview and Scrutiny Board did make a number of recommendations about how elements of the scheme have evolved in the last year. However, there was broad consensus about the items that are in front of us today for consideration by full council, which are namely the investment into car parks and private rented sector. Obviously, this was deferred from the last meeting because there was information missing, particularly around the risk register. I've received that. I think all other councillors have. Therefore, I'm certainly content and will be supporting the motion. And none of the issues that are raised here today for full council's consideration caused any broad consternation in the Overview and Scrutiny Board. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Broadhead. Are there any members wishing to speak? Can I then call upon Councillor Brown? Did you wish to address the council?
No, Chair, actually, I have nothing further to add to what my colleague did in presenting the paper.
Thank you very much. In which case, if there are no further speakers, can I ask if there is any dissent on this proposal, please? Thank you, members, in which case that's been approved. Thank you. I would then like to move on to item 6B from Cabinet 24th June 2020, minute number 182, the organisational design, implementation and budget. I would like to say that Councillor Diana Butler has submitted a question on the Poole Civic Centre in accordance with the Constitution. It is proposed that this question is dealt with prior to consideration of the recommendations, and I now call upon Councillor Butler to ask her question, and I will ask the Leader of the Council to respond. Councillor Butler, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, my question is, Poole Civic Centre is a beautiful listed Art Deco building, which is part of Poole's historic identity. Why is it proposed to sell this unique asset whilst there are many ways to enhance its use as a civic building and increase financial income through room and office hire? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. Councillor Vicky Slade, did you wish to
Yes.
Respond, please?
Thank you, Chairman. I have a response, and I note that there will be some reference to this in my presentation as well. The information provided to Cabinet and overview and scrutiny clearly illustrates the need for a significant rationalisation of our property portfolio for the Council. This rationalisation and reduction of operating costs was a clear driver of local government reorganisation's proposal and business case, and it is inevitable that there will be some high-profile and difficult decisions as we move through the process. With the earlier adoption of the Bournemouth Town Hall campus as the site for the BCP Council Civic Centre and principal administrative hub, a decision based on a wide variety of criteria, including the building's capacity, cost, environmental constraints and geographic issues, we will need to develop and consider alternative uses for the buildings that are released. In the case of Poole Civic Centre, this work will take account of the unique characteristics, including the listing of part of the site and the potential, along with the accompanying cost-benefit appraisal, the continued use of all or part of it for heritage and civic purposes. And I believe that that response has been sent to Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Councillor Slade. Councillor Butler, did you have a supplementary question at all?
Yes, I did.
Thank you, Councillor Butler.
Yes. If I can ask, added to the civic use, have you considered the massive opportunities that exist for Poole Civic Centre to earn quite a bit of income from hiring out rooms for things like weddings, conferences, training events, and also long-term business office use? Considering the difficulties businesses have nowadays, I feel that the internal structure, the modern parts, could easily be changed for that purpose with minimal cost. Thank you.
Leader, did you wish to respond?
Yes, thank you for those suggestions. We have done a piece of work already on the accommodation strategy and will continue to do so, but we do also have other options around the site, which may include the redevelopment of part of the site for housing and other uses, but we will obviously keep all options open on the table. There is a considerable amount of office space available within the town centre, which has better connectivity, which is currently empty. So at the moment, we aren't receiving any indications that this site is particularly of value for those purposes. But obviously, until such time as the work is complete, all options remain on the table.
Thank you, Leader. Can I now ask you to introduce the item, please?
Yes, of course. So the paper we have before us follows up from last year when we agreed a new operating model for the council based on a range of principles that we set out in a two-day piece of work with senior managers in the summer. The organisational design and operating model said that we would go off and we would find some market support for the transformation model that we wanted to achieve, bearing in mind, of course, that local government reorganisation was predicated on making significant transformational savings within the council, not just bringing the councils together, but transforming them into a modern, accessible and accountable council. If you recall back last year, there was a budget attached to this piece of work at around £30 million to be spent, which would expect to deliver up to £45 million worth of benefits. The work was due to see improvements over a 3 to 4 year period and would see us instruct a business partner to develop much of the work on our behalf so that our officers were able to get on with business as usual. The pre-market work showed a lot of interest in our plans, but demonstrated that actually we could be far more ambitious than the £45 million proposed savings. And what we now have before us is a paper that does have a higher price tag, but does come with a bigger expectation around a minimum savings of £47 million rather than an expected savings. So we are expecting to go further. We are obviously seeing quite significant changes in transformation already as a result of the home working and virtual work that's been brought about by COVID. And we have therefore seen we can probably go faster than the 3 to 4 years and deeper in terms of the propensity to change the way we work and to move out of our civic buildings and into community hubs and remote working. One of the papers attached does go through the finances of the project, and originally we were expecting that we would be using a combination of an allocation of reserves, revenue to capital and prudential borrowing with some capital receipts. We have now been able to establish that funds from the high needs block no longer need to be reserved for that matter, and that can therefore be brought into the transformation fund, which means we may no longer need to use prudential borrowing. However, I would stress that whilst we do have capital receipts to come, we are not ruling out the use of prudential borrowing through the Public Works Loan Board and other places in the future. But what we're really saying now is that we no longer need to do that. Therefore, the ongoing revenue costs of that have been wiped out of the funding model. Also attached in Appendix 2, I think it is the timeline, which clearly shows a series of work streams, and we will work with our business partner for each of those packages of work. I would like to stress the governance around this. There will be a member group set up. It's due to be set up imminently to start work in September, and we'll actually work alongside an officer board to ensure that as we go through each piece of work, we are very clear about what we're looking to achieve from each of our models. And what is quite unusual about this work is that rather than setting in stone from day one a very long list of requirements from our partner, we have a flexible arrangement which actually allows us to look at it at the beginning of each of our work programmes, does not commit us to spending, and allows us to retain flexibility as technology and other opportunities present themselves. So I think this is a great piece of work that's been led by our transformation director, and I look forward to this being implemented over the coming years. One final thing to say is, now that we have adopted Bournemouth Town Hall as our centre, we had allocated up to £29 million for a complete refurbishment and remodelling of that building. With the proposals in this paper, we are no longer proposing to do that significant piece of work. We do hope to close down some of our buildings more quickly, and we will therefore be doing a much more lighter touch piece of refurbishment work to make the Bournemouth Centre properly habitable, and a further paper will come on this later in the year.
Thank you, Leader. I understand you have a seconder in Councillor David Brown. Councillor Brown, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm happy to second the paper that's just been presented by the leader. I'll just briefly comment that from a financial perspective, I think it is a great achievement that we've got to the position where we don't need to necessarily consider Public Works Loan Board borrowing to fund this transformation programme. And it's only as a result of the budget that we set in February and the sort of responsible budget where we did provide for other potential liabilities which the council were facing, and now because of changes in policy we were able to release some of the reserves that we were keeping aside to fund the special educational needs costs in the future, that we've been able to release that to potentially use for the transformation programme. So it's good news that actually we've been responsible with our finances. We've kept money aside that actually we can now look to fund this ourselves without the future revenue costs of having to pay back loans to do it. But you know, as it works through, we will make the right financial decisions at the right time to fund this whole work, and that may include borrowing, but we don't have to look at that at the moment.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Is there any members wishing to speak on minute 182, please? Councillor Miller.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'll start by saying, we're really pleased to see the Alliance move towards what's been our long-term ambitious vision for what transformation actually means. It's our belief and the belief of the market that the Alliance's ambition at the start of this process did not and does not go far enough. The leader as portfolio holder has got the preceding papers that she's brought to us, so seriously wrong, and she's just alluded to it in the fact that she originally wanted to spend £30 million refurbishing the Bournemouth Town Hall. The market and I have been consistent in telling her that the previous paper lacked ambition, and at no point was it necessary to spend 30 million. We were also shocked to see until our intervention that transformation was removed from the Cabinet Forward Plan, and we also challenged how this project is being funded. But that said, this project is absolutely essential to delivering a long-term sustainable budget where our context, our absolute overarching context, can move from service cuts to best practice and investment. Both our officers and future partners need to hear our absolute commitment to this project, regardless of disagreements that I've raised above over ambition and funding. To that end, it's imperative, I believe, that we put a clear message to those officers and future partners that we will support the transformation programme, regardless of any political differences on how we get there. So I'm very happy to put on record my and our absolute commitment to it. So I will be supporting this paper. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. Any further speakers, please? Councillor Wilson, please. Kieran Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just slightly confused by the Leader of the Opposition's comments there, that he seems to want to be more ambitious but spend less money. I think that the previous plans around the Town Hall were very ambitious, but obviously circumstances that have affected us globally have obviously affected these plans. And I think that whatever we do transformationally, I think we're going to have the height of ambition throughout. So I just wanted to kind of come back on him on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Nigel Brooks, please. Councillor Brooks. Councillor Brooks. Councillor Brooks, we can't hear you if you are speaking. Could you just double check and ensure you've unmuted your microphone?
Question?
Councillor Brooks? Chief Executive, can I just ask whether Councillor Brooks is still online, please?
Yeah, he's still there.
Just checking the records, we think so. As far as we can tell, there have been one or two problems of just signal dropping in and out, but we understand he's still online. We're checking. Councillor Brooks, can you hear us? So, Chairman, we'll just have another check with the DEM services officers.
Can you speak, Mike?
I can speak. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I can hear both Councillor Hilliard and Councillor Cox, and I understand you're at Christchurch. Would it be possible for Councillor Brooks to use one of your machines? Is that possible to enable Councillor Brooks?
Yeah. We are just working on that.
Thank you, Councillor Hilliard.
Can you hear me now? Chairman?
Hello, Councillor Brooks. Yes, please go ahead.
Sorry about that. We've had some IT problems here, which the support team are trying to sort out.
Thank you.
I'll start again. Thank you, Chairman. It is quite apparent that we've had a period of over 3 months of COVID-19, which is dramatically changing the way people across the whole country are working, primarily remotely, using the wonderful ability of Skype and other systems to actually hold meetings and to carry out face-to-face discussions. Looking at the report, I found, I think it was on page 72, 74, buried away was the comment that the officers will still open to consideration of alternative building locations. It seems to me that before launching into a commitment to a large scheme at Bournemouth Civic, some further work needs to be done to look at what are the true accommodations for people who do be centrally located, as against the vast majority of the teams for BCP are now working remotely. It seems to me that there's quite a learning curve here to go through before coming to sign off some £30 million to proceed with a project where the whole way that we're working is dramatically changing. Don't get me wrong, I do support the need of investment and transformation of the way BCP is coming together. But just looking at the headlines as to how accommodation strategy should be working, I think some further work needs to be done to see how actually space utilisation and space requirement is going to work for this council in the future. And thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor Brooks. We did have problems with hearing you at a couple of points there, but I'm sure that members probably got the gist of your point that you made. Thank you. Are there any further speakers, please? Councillor Dunlop.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd actually like to just draw some attention to the BCP Equality Impact Assessment template, if I may. So not particularly on the subject matter. I'm just a bit concerned about the use of language in it. On page 4 of that document, it states 68% of the workforce identifies as female. Can we please correct our language, because sex is immutable, females are females, and we don't identify as female, we simply are female. And I'm also concerned that it also says on the next page 3% of the workforce is identified as having some form of disability. I think we need to be careful that we're not too flippant with the way people actually are or aren't. I think those people with disabilities might feel somewhat offended that they're considered as identifying as having a disability. So I'm just concerned with the language that we're using rather than stating things that are actual physical facts or biological facts. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dunlop. I'm sure that officers will note the points that you raise. Can I call upon Councillor Millie Earle, please? Councillor Earle.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to point out to Councillor Dunlop that a lot of us do not agree with that, or her idea that being male or female or your gender is actually something that is factual. I believe it's a part of our identity. You can identify however way which you choose to, and being female is just as much an identity as anything else. So I just wanted to clarify, because that does not apply to me, and I would certainly not want the council or people to think that that's something I think, because it's quite clearly not. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Earle. Councillor Rachel Maidment. Councillor Maidment, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Councillor Earl has pretty much made the point that I was looking to make. In the Equalities Act 2010, it is very clear that people can use, for example, facilities for the gender to which they identify. There are many complexities in terms of gender and biology. There are plenty of people who have, for example, XXY chromosomes. We could go into a lot of depth around this. However, I entirely disagree with Councillor Dunlop, and as Councillor Earl has said, I want to make that on record that is an inaccurate description, and I do not agree with it.
Thank you very much, Councillor Maidment. Councillor Trent, please.
I think, Chair, Councillor Dunlop wanted to respond to the previous speaker. Mine's a slightly different point. So if I can go after Councillor Dunlop, then it, runs more smoothly.
Thank you, Councillor Trent. I had a request to speak from Councillor Dunlop to respond. Councillor Dunlop, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm afraid that my colleagues aren't familiar with the Equality Act. I think if you look at it, you'll see that a protected characteristic is sex. People may identify as certain things, and you're conflating gender with sex. Women, females, do not identify as female. It is a fact. There are two sexes, they are male or female, and I think if you actually take a little bit more notice of the protected characteristics, and I understand your concerns, absolutely, there is also a protected characteristic called gender reassignment, and that is particularly for those who wish to identify as the opposite gender. We must not conflate sex with gender. We must comply with the Equality Act.
Thank you, Councillor Dunlop. I really don't want at this point to get into a debate with regards to gender. I think your point is well made, and if there's no further wish to speak on this matter, I will move to the vote.
Chairman, it's not a point, it's not a view, it is a fact. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dunlop. Councillor Tony Trent, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think we have the mention was made of equalities, but I think the one thing which is going to be paramount in whatever buildings arrangement we have is to make sure that the disabled access is good. I've had two former colleagues in years gone by that had disabilities that fought very hard to get reasonable access to the Poole Civic Centre, and I really think that rather than gender identity or any of these other points, we really do need to make sure that whatever work we do, disabled access is first class. At the moment, Bournemouth Town Hall has appalling disabled access, and that needs to be high on the list of what needs doing. And I think whatever we do, whatever our thinking is, that is important. We don't want to cause people problems because they have a disability. And as I say, I've had two former colleagues that have had disabilities that had to fight very hard to get good access. And I'm hoping that this is something that is sorted out in the new building.
Thank you, Councillor Trent. Members, if there are no further speakers, I would like to move to the vote. So anybody wishing to speak, could you please identify in the taskbar, please? Councillor Slade.
Thank you very much, Chair. I just wanted to come back on a couple of things that have been said. The first thing I would like to say is I'm very pleased that the Leader of the Opposition has expressed his support for this paper. However, I would just like to clarify for the record that the proposal to spend up to £29 million on the Bournemouth Town Hall was supported across the council, did go through a process which did include the then leader of the Conservative group and the chair of Overview and Scrutiny, who's still in post, and was supported by them. So to suggest that that isn't something they supported is probably a little misleading. The other thing to say about the Cabinet Forward Plan is that this was not specifically taken off the Cabinet Forward Plan, but at the point in time where we hit a global pandemic, the forward plan for Cabinet was suspended, and the only items that were kept on it in the short term were the items that were required to get us through a point in time where matters had to be dealt with. It was expected that Cabinet and full Council meetings would be suspended for the duration of COVID-19, and I'm incredibly proud of the team who've managed to get us up and running, working in a much more cohesive way than many councils, which have seen this council be able to have every single Cabinet and full Council meeting that it was scheduled to have during this time. And I think that shows a huge testament to the officers and members who are keen to make sure transformation works for us. On the item around the buildings, I note that the point relating to 54F in the paper, that this is not a paper about the accommodation strategy. It refers to the accommodation strategy, and it refers to the fact that we no longer feel the need to spend £29 million on a building. And what that's really saying is we were looking to spend 30 plus 29, total of 59. We're now looking to spend potentially 37 plus a very small number, which will be significantly tens of millions less than the original total plan. We do keep all options open. It does state in 54F that we are continually reviewing our need for spatial resource, and a paper, as I've mentioned earlier, will be coming back. Just a quick reference to the Equalities Impact Assessment. I think Councillor Dunlop is right to talk about language. I think we do all have to be very, very careful around our language, and I think we can take from this that we need to be considering a whole range of needs. What I'm really proud of with this Equalities Impact Assessment is that they've really looked very closely at the specific issues that different protected characteristics will need in order for us to make these changes, whether it be age, disability, pregnancy, sex, gender reassignment, etc., etc. They're all really important, and I think we do have to recognise that working virtually isn't right for everybody, that the proposals that you'll see coming forward in the coming months around what we will do with our buildings will actually make our environment for work far more open to people, far more inclusive and far more productive. And I'm really pleased with the level of detail that this Equality Impact Assessment has gone in. So I do commend this paper. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leader. It's been proposed, seconded and debated. Can I ask if there's any dissent, please, on item 6B? Any abstentions? So I've received one vote against the motion, and so that will be recorded. Thank you very much. That motion is carried. We now move on to item 6C. Members are advised that if they wish to discuss the detail of any of the confidential appendices relating to the recommendation on the above, the meeting will be required to move into the confidential session. Councillor Lewis Allison, I understand that you will move the recommendations and that Councillor David Brown will second the move. Councillor David Brown, please.
So yes, I'm happy to second the proposal.
Beg your pardon. Councillor Lewis Allison. Do beg your pardon, Councillor Allison.
No problem. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the paper we've got in front of us is a proposed redevelopment of Bistro on the Beach in Southbourne. The current building there is going to reach its end of its life in 2023 and won't be operational any further. So in line with our seafront strategy and the council's corporate plan, we're putting forward a proposal to replace it to make sure that we've got continued amenities for both members of the public, tourists, and for locals. The paper sets out quite a lot of information. I'm happy to take any questions or debate at this point. As mentioned earlier in the meeting, this is the project which hasn't yet been through planning committee. So in terms of specifics, in terms of planning, we can't really discuss. But anything else, I'm open to talk about. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Allison. Are there any members wishing to speak on this item, please? It would appear there are no members wishing to speak. May I ask the question then, is there any dissension from the proposal? Right, I've had a late request to speak from Councillor Hadley. Councillor Hadley, please.
Apologies, it was just, I'm not quite sure what happened there. I was just pleased to see particularly the lift access to the beach and as part of this development. I think it's good for people with disabilities to be able to get to the beach, and I think that's to be welcomed. I think the project is a good one. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hadley. I've had one vote against the proposal from Councillor Diana Butler. Are there any abstentions at all on this item? Thank you very much. That motion is carried, and Councillor Butler's vote clearly is recorded. Thank you. Moving on then, members, to item 6D, minute number 187, to convert the Bournemouth Learning Centre building into a school. Councillors are advised if they wish to discuss the detail of any of the confidential appendices relating to the recommendation on the above, the meeting will be required to be moved into confidential session. Can I call upon Councillor Sandra Moore, please? Councillor Moore.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Well, this is a proposal to convert the Bournemouth Learning Centre into a special school to be run as a satellite to a local external provider. The name of the external provider can't be named in public at this stage. This paper went to the Overview and Scrutiny Board, was approved by Cabinet on the 24th of June, and the disposal of the lease now needs to be approved by Council. We're increasing local specialist provision, which will meet increased demand and the needs of our children, and at the same time reduce the pressure on the high needs block funding and the school transport budget. Other projects were also approved by Cabinet on 22nd of April and the 27th of May. The BLC was originally built as a school, but its current use is as an adult training facility with office space. The site is already classed as D1, and as there's no need for significant external building work, it shouldn't have to go through planning. But a 6-week formal consultation is required by the DFE. So if agreed, the BLC will close by the end of December 2020. Work will start in January 21, with a view to opening by September 21. Currently, just under 200 members of staff work in the BLC, the majority being BCP officers, but also colleagues from partner organisations who lease space in the building. The relocation of these staff was anticipated as part of the transformation programme, and this proposal has simply accelerated this process. Many of the BCP teams will be relocated in community-based provision, children's centres, for example, as part of the early help service review. Others will be moved into existing council accommodation, and the council will also work with partners to find alternative accommodation in existing council buildings. Staff have been consulted, and I have met on 2 occasions with ward and other councillors. The questions and issues raised at those meetings will be included in the public consultation. From a local perspective, traffic and parking are very much a problem in this area because of all the schools. However, this proposal should actually improve the situation because less staff will use the site and the children will arrive in minibuses. So this is definitely a good news story for BCP Council, and I ask Council to support the recommendation for the disposal of this lease. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. I understand you have a seconder in Councillor Leslie Dedman. Councillor Dedman, please. They may still be having problems at Christchurch.
Chairman, we're still having problems in Christchurch, but Leslie says that she's happy to second that.
Thank you, Chair.
I just about heard Councillor Dedman in the background then, on your microphone, Councillor McCormack. Thank you. I have a request to speak from Councillor Hedges. Councillor Nigel Hedges, please.
Thank you, Chair. As one of the 2 ward councillors for Wallasdown and Winton West, the plans for BLC did come as a bit of a surprise because that scheme had been formulating for some time. Both Councillor Phillips and myself expressed our concerns that we weren't consulted. I have to pay tribute and thanks to Councillor Moore and to Mr Goddard, who rectified that quite quickly. We've been shared all the information so far. Obviously, our role is to represent our residents in that area, and any change of use, its justification, its impacts, and as Councillor Moore has mentioned, concerning parking and traffic and safety of children, and the fact that there will be 4 schools in Ensbury Avenue is quite daunting, but there are mitigating aspects. But I can't speak for Councillor Phillips, but I would be relatively confident that we're fully informed and we're paying very close attention to the development of the plans, looking at the timescale, which may be lengthening to some degree at the moment, which will give us as ward councillors more time to talk and consult with our residents and to really get all the information we need about this project. But at the moment, I'd just like to thank Councillor Moore and Mr Goddard for their time and including us maybe a little bit late, but certainly very welcome to be involved in watching this plan develop, and we'll be paying close attention. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hedges. Councillor Mike White, please. Councillor White.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to say I very much welcome this proposal in principle for a special school, and I fully support the ward member who's just spoken in ensuring full consultation with local people and ward members as this proposal rolls out. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor White. Councillor Brown. Councillor David Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to support my colleague Councillor Moore on this paper. Both of us sat on the schools forum this morning, and there was some discussion over increasing places and sufficiency for pupils with special educational needs. And I think this is a great paper. It indicates, and I accept there's been difficulties around sort of briefing ward members, etc. But it just shows that this administration really is getting to grips with the dire state that we had in lack of places for pupils with special educational needs. I think the figures were quoted this morning at the schools forum that we are looking at providing new places for pupils with special educational needs. The rate that we've done in the last year is equivalent to about 4 years worth of work in the preceding authorities. We've quadrupled really the workload that we're doing in terms of providing these places. It just shows how we're getting to grips with these issues. We've identified these difficulties and we really are looking at all the options and pushing ahead with them.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Moore, did you wish to come back or sum up?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I just want to say that I totally agree with the ward councillors. It was an error in process and they should have been consulted sooner than they were. And hopefully we've learned from this experience, and in future I will make sure, and I have made sure, that consultation will take place right at the start. Otherwise I thank them for their support. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. If there are no further speakers, can I ask if there is any dissent with regards to this item, please? In which case we'll take that as a unanimous vote. Thank you very much. Moving on then, members, to item 6E, Cabinet 24th June 2020, minute number 188, Templeman House, Leedham Road, Bournemouth. Councillor Wilson, I understand you will move the recommendations, and I understand you have a seconder in Councillor Leslie Dedman. Councillor Wilson, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Templeman House is the first of 2 housing schemes that I'm bringing forward to Council tonight. The proposed scheme is for 27 1- and 2-bedroom apartments, which will help towards our housing targets. This is a very exciting scheme, as it is our first in over 20 years to be built out at social rent out of the Bournemouth HRA, something that this administration is keen to see more of coming forward. We also intend to build the scheme to pacifist standards, which is in line with our climate change and ecological emergency agenda, but it will also benefit residents who will see much reduced fuel bills as a result. The scheme will utilise £1.6 million worth of right to buy receipts, which have to be spent within 3 years, as well as £430,000 worth of Section 106 money. Templeman House was previously a care home of 41 bedrooms under the management of Care South, who are operating at a 50% void rate. There was an option to refurbish or repurpose, and it was considered by colleagues in adult social care, but they were happy for the site to be given over to housing. I would like to point out an error at paragraph 24A in the report. There was an error that at the time of writing was correct, and the link is not being removed, but instead there will be a gate with 2-way secured access. But to summarise, I'm really excited to bring forward this social rented scheme, the first in Bournemouth for some time, and I'm sure that it won't be the last. So I'm happy to bring forward the recommendations as laid out in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Dedman.
Councillor Dedman's still having computer issues, but she is happy to second that.
Thank you very much, Councillor McCormack. Are there any speakers, please? Thank you, members. It's been proposed and seconded. No further debate. Can I ask if there are any dissent with regards to this proposal? That is item 6E. Thank you, Councillor Jackie Edwards. Your abstention is recorded. And that motion is carried. Thank you very much. We now move on to item 6F. Councillor Wilson.
Cheers, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Moorside Road is the second of my two schemes. And firstly, I would like to correct another error on the report brought up at overview and scrutiny by one of the ward councillors, Councillor Fear, and also congratulations on becoming the vice chair. That the ward should be Kinson instead of Kinson South. But besides that small mistake, Councillor Fear was also very supportive of the scheme at ONS. It is proposed for 14 much needed 4-bedroom homes at affordable rents. The scheme has received statements at Cabinet as well as Council tonight, and the three main concerns seem to be around the issues of flooding, piling and finances of the scheme. Concerns around the flooding, the proposed development will provide a scheme for the whole site providing the disposal of surface water runoff, incorporating sustainable urban drainage systems. These drainage systems are designed to reduce the potential impact of new and existing developments with the respective surface water discharges. And it is also important to say that the amount of surface water that will be on the site post-development is to be no greater than that prior to the development, as to meet the requirements of the local plan. With regards to piling, there will be a piling engineer appointed by the main contractor. The piling engineer will provide very detailed design in accordance with the soil load conditions and will include a thorough risk assessment. There's also some concern over different ecological aspects of the scheme, and I think the portfolio holder for the environment and climate change and ecology will speak about that later. But we have a specialty ecologist working on site, and the removal of slow worms and any other issues relating to ecology are consulted upon, and they really do a very thorough and professional job. The proposed homes have been valued at over £300,000 each, which is less than the overall cost of the development. However, the scheme utilises funding such as right to buy receipts, as did Timberman House, and they would again would be returned to central government if not used within 3 years. Even more importantly though, the scheme provides the council with a financial surplus and 14 much needed affordable 4-bed family homes. The proposed homes will meet a higher standard, and tenants will be able to benefit from reduced utility costs due to higher levels of insulation, triple glazing, PV panels, and to be able to provide some free electricity. So I'm really, I understand the residents' concerns, but I think we have a really professional team working on this, and we've been really meticulously and thoroughly robust in our processes throughout. So I'm very happy to bring forward the recommendations as laid out in the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Can I call upon Councillor Moore, please? I understand you will second the proposal.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Well, there's absolutely no doubt that we need these 14 4-bed affordable properties. And I know that there are environmental concerns being raised by local residents, but as a Camford Heath ward councillor with Triple SI Heathlands literally on my doorstep, I can appreciate and understand these concerns. However, I can also offer reassurance that our officers are very used to managing these concerns to everyone's satisfaction, and I have no hesitation in seconding this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Can I ask members, are there any members wishing to speak on this one? Councillor Felicity Ross. Councillor Rice, please.
Thank you. Yes, I just wanted to highlight that in my role as Cabinet Member for Environment, I would like to say that I have appreciated the recent correspondence from Friends of the Earth and local residents around the Moorside housing development. These aspects have been looked into in depth over the years and have also been through the separate process of the planning committee. However, with this type of development, it can be a very difficult situation for the local residents when such a large change is proposed. Because of this, I have taken extra care to look into the comments myself and spoken to experts out with the council as well. I would particularly like to clarify some of the comments about the nearby Fern Heath triple SI. The triple SI designation in itself does not mean that it needs to have a 400-metre buffer. A triple SI site also needs to have international designations for that 400-metre feature to be relevant. These are the special protection area, the special area of conservation, and Ramsar designations. Usually, these designations are present in an SSSI, but it is those designations that mean that there is the 400-metre buffer, and this Fernheath SSSI does not have those international designations, therefore it doesn't require the 400-metre buffer. I have also asked for details regarding the management of protected species on the site, which, if the Council decides to vote in favour of this scheme this evening, I am satisfied that the Council and its partners are fulfilling its duties, following the policies that were in place when planning permission was granted and following national guidance. There is opportunity going forwards with our local plan development, given the ecological emergency that we have declared, to create action through the policies that we develop, so that we can ensure an increase in biodiversity going forwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rice. Members, can I remind all members to please turn your microphones off if you are not speaking? Thank you. Councillor David Brown, please. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I just wanted to comment on this paper about the proposed housing development on Moorside Road, and the last one actually, the Templeman House site. I mean, it shows there's £11 million worth of investment in affordable and social housing on these two sites that the council's making. There are no easy sites. There's no just sort of nice green areas or flat areas that we were just waiting, saying, oh, why haven't we thought of building housing there? Most of the sites that come forward now for new council housing are going to have difficulties. There's going to be constraints on the sites of one form or another, and we have to be imaginative in the sites that we look to, because let's be clear that providing this housing is incredibly important for the families that will be able to move there. The people that will be able to move into these houses when they're built, it will transform their lives, and it will transform the life chances of the children in those families by having secure tenancies and being able to sort of be part of those communities. So I think it's really important that we work hard to continue to search for sites and land that we can use for providing this sort of social housing, and I wholeheartedly support the paper and the recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Farquhar, please.
Thank you, Chair. I really appreciate the comments by Councillor Moore and particularly by Councillor Rice. I would just like to put a little appeal in on behalf of the residents, and just for transparency, I have been lobbied by residents in that particular area, is that the results or the findings of the ecological studies which are referred to are actually transparent and made public. Consequently, I think that will go a long way towards our commitment to looking at other options for enhancing our ecological offering in the area of development.
Thank you, Councillor Farquhar. Councillor Tony Trent, please. Councillor Trent.
Thank you, Chair. This was one of the ones that I thought, well, it hadn't been before planning committee, and there would be some sort of discussion on it, but it obviously went to planning 2 years ago, so that was presumably Bournemouth Council. I was very interested in the various correspondence about it and the fears about it. Being someone who lives near and represents an area that's got several areas of heathland, the 400-metre is a very sensitive and sacrosanct thing there. Presumably that was taken fully into account at the time of the original planning application, and I seem to remember one of the bits of information that was shared on that indicated that from the centre of the site, the nearest area of heathland is just on the 400-metre mark, not within 400 metres, but if you get to the edge of the site, it may have strayed over. But obviously this has all been taken into account, and I think it's good that something important and much needed is being provided on this site, and obviously, you know, we've considered, or some of our predecessors have considered the planning aspects of the 400 metres, and they've obviously received the advice that it doesn't fall foul of the 400 metre rule. Otherwise, I would be, sort of fiercely criticising it, because of the nature of it. But that is done and dusted and part of history.
Thank you, Councillor Trent. Councillor Robert Lawton. Councillor Lawton, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Turn your mic on. Right, I think we're back on. Turn them all down. Can you hear me? Can you hear me, Chairman?
That's better, Councillor Lawton.
Yes, thank you.
There is still a bit of background noise.
Yeah, I'm just sorting the mics out. I'd like to congratulate the administration for approving a scheme which was approved by me 2.5 years ago. The planning goes probably longer than that. I agree with Councillor Trent that we did take into consideration SSI and all of the other periphery obstacles which were present at that time. 14 four-bedroom houses are a significant addition to the council housing stock, and as I say again, I congratulate the administration for bringing forward a scheme which I developed nearly 3 years ago.
Well done. Thank you very much, Councillor Lawton. Are there any further speakers, please? In which case it has been proposed and seconded. Is there any dissent, please? And I do note that Councillor Dwayne Farr has typed in abstention on the sidebar. And we have a vote against from Councillor Butler. An abstention from Councillor Rigby. And I will declare that that motion has been passed. Members, moving on now to item 6G, exclusion of press and public. This relates to the item 6H on this evening's agenda. Can I have a proposal and seconder from the floor, please, that we move into exempt session?
Happy to propose.
Thank you, Leader.
I'm happy to second.
Thank you very much. We'll just wait a moment until I get the all clear from the officer to ensure that the video recording has stopped, and then we'll return once the item has been debated and voted on. Thank you. Thank you, members. I now move on to agenda item 7, the appointment of Director of Law and Governance and Monitoring Officer for the BCP Council. Members are advised that if they wish to discuss the detail of the confidential appendix on the above, the meeting will be required to move into confidential session. I call upon Councillor Vicky Slade, who I understand wishes to move the recommendation in the report. Councillor Slade, please.
Thank you for that, Chair. So I'm delighted to be bringing forward this item to appoint the new Director of Law and Governance and Monitoring Officer. As you know, the previous monitoring officer stepped down from her post earlier this year, and we have had I had the joy earlier in this lockdown period of welcoming Anne Brown as our interim monitoring officer, who I should add I have still not met face to face. It will be a travesty if we have a new appointment start before I ever get to meet Anne, because I won't know whether the person I'm seeing on the screen is actually the real Anne. The process has been very robust. We were fortunate in getting a lot of interest in this position, which I think is a testament to the reputation that BCP Council is developing in local government as a place to come and work. And we did have a process which involved a panel of councillors from across party who did a session with the shortlisted candidates, a session with the corporate management board, and then an interview panel which included myself, the leader of the opposition, the deputy leader and the chief executive, along with the head of HR. And following that process, we are recommending the appointment of Susan Zeiss as the new monitoring officer. For the purposes of members, there is a copy of her CV attached, which has been circulated with you in advance so that you have the opportunity to see what her history is. The options before you are to appoint her as the monitoring officer or to not appoint her, but I would strongly recommend that we proceed and appoint Susan Zeiss as monitoring officer as per the paper in front of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. I understand you have a seconder in Councillor Howell. Councillor Howell, please.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I'm pleased to second this. I was, as the leader said, involved in the interview process. This is an extremely challenging role, especially at the time of transformation. But Susan gave me confidence that she would be able to perform that role well, and I'd just like to welcome her to the authority, assuming that this vote actually passes.
Thank you, Councillor Howe. Can I ask members if there is any debate, please? Councillor Mellor, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'd just like to, very briefly say that I've also, was on that panel and I was hugely impressed by a lot of the candidates on there, and certainly the candidate we've centred on. So it's clear that we've got somebody who's potentially a very strong person in this role, and I look forward to welcoming her into this council as and when the rest of the council can vote on this item. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mellor. Are there any members wishing to speak, please? Nobody has indicated. I would therefore move to the vote. Can I ask, is there any dissension with regards to the proposal that is on the table? Any abstentions, please? Thank you very much, and that motion is carried. Thank you. I would now like to move on to agenda item number 8, notice of motions in accordance with the procedure 13. I understand, Councillor Mellor, you have a motion to set before the council, and I call on Councillor Mellor, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the opportunity to bring this motion. Firstly, I believe it's important to put on record a level of disappointment that we're having to bring this motion to Council, as we had been advised at different points by senior officers that the revised budget would be coming to Council as a full budget paper per the protocol at our annual February meetings, which would have given councillors the right to debate it in full and to suggest an alternative budget by way of amendment. But the Alliance have decided to bring forward such a seismic change to budget without consultation or recourse to councillors is both surprising and concerning. That said, we've deliberately not drafted this motion to be contentious, as it simply is requesting that Cabinet consider alternative proposals. We've presented a separate paper that shows a potential direction of travel, that talks of our opportunity and responsibility to show leadership to our communities at this time by bringing forward a more ambitious programme that addresses the needs of this unprecedented time. This leadership includes addressing challenges, including our economy, seafront schools, our overall community safety, whilst also addressing our climate emergency by suggesting a further £2 million of budget on top of reinstating money this Alliance have taken out of the environment budget that was allocated by this Council in February. We have a job of work to do. We have the resources to do it, and we can lead our communities through this. We also have a community absolutely screaming out for us to work together, to listen to ideas from across the chamber, to work collegiately, and this is an opportunity to do just that. Before I commend this motion to to our chamber, I just want to say let's all be part of a solution together. We have an opportunity to do this, and we can do it. So we'd very much welcome the opportunity to be a part of this process. So I do commend this motion to our colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. I understand you have a seconder in Councillor Inigar. Councillor Inigar?
Yes, seconded. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Are there any members wishing to speak on this notice of motion, please? Councillor David Brown. Councillor Brown?
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, it just took me a moment to take my mute off there. Yeah, just to thank the opposition for this motion and the related paper, which I read with interest. Some of it's worth debating in there, but I have to take issue with some of the content and the comments there by Councillor Mellor, that he said he's disappointed that councillors hadn't had the opportunity to contribute to the budget response to date, and we welcome the opportunity to do so. Well, councillors absolutely have had the opportunity to give their views about the budget response. Papers, including all of the budget savings and adjustments, were published weeks before the Cabinet meeting in June, well before the overview and scrutiny board, so that the forecast budget position and the council's response could be fully scrutinised and debated by the overview and scrutiny board. Members of the ONS board made little comment about the budget revisions and didn't recommend changes, but there was the opportunity there for them to contribute, absolutely. Any member can also make representations directly at cabinet meetings to say that there's not been an opportunity to comment or contribute is simply not correct. There will be regular opportunities throughout this financial year for members to comment and contribute, as the ongoing budget monitoring and budget response reports will come forward to Cabinet and to future overview and scrutiny boards. So it's an ongoing process where there will be an opportunity for members to comment and see what's happening. Now, the initial opposition alternative budget response paper was somewhat vague and lacking in detail. I'm aware that this afternoon a more detailed paper has been issued, but I haven't had the opportunity to properly digest that extra information. But it appears to be partly a budget response and partly a new corporate strategy for the council. My main concern is the ever-changing and inconsistent budget response of the Conservative opposition. Back in February, they could have put forward an alternative budget proposal, but only made minor suggested changes, and they didn't oppose the responsible budget that was put forward by the Unity Alliance. Then, following the pandemic in April, they called for a swift commercial response to the pandemic, which sought to cut costs and staff. And then at the Overview and Scrutiny Board in May, they questioned how the budget response should be flexible to cope with future uncertainty. But then in June at the Overview and Scrutiny Board, the opposition wanted a new budget to be put before Council, which would have removed the flexibility that we had in making our responses. And now in July, looking at this paper, we have what looks to me like a sort of borrow more and spend budget response, in spite of the fact that we're still in the midst of a global pandemic and there's incredible uncertainty over the future financial outlook for the council. So we've had about 5 different opposition budget responses in less than 6 months. We need to be wary of suggestions to borrow more money to deliver new priorities and new initiatives. Preceding authorities in this conurbation have borrowed significant sums fund new initiatives. For example, the Community Finance Initiative, the Bank of Bournemouth, lost significant sums, it was closed, and BCP Council is still covering those liabilities. One-off borrowing to fund service priorities is not sustainable in the long term. The Unity Alliance has a consistent position of responsible, sustainable, flexible and responsive financial management, continues to deliver good services for residents, delivers our corporate strategy, and contrary to what has been said in this paper, it continues to invest in our priority areas and will do over the medium-term financial plan. That said, I'm happy to work cross-party, I'm happy to listen to comments from across the council, and we are happy to consider the proposals that are set out in this paper at a future meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor L.J. Evans. Councillor Evans, please.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, no problem.
Wonderful. And I'd also like to say thank you to the Conservative group for submitting this motion for debate. I'm sure we all appreciated the glossy brochure accompanying it, as it's nice to see people using their time in lockdown constructively. However, usually when we're given budget details to consider, there are some actual facts and figures, so I did find this approach a little bit strange. I was initially going to request a deferral, but Councillor Mellor decided to send us an amended brochure just 3 hours before the meeting. If the opposition was serious about their proposals and collaborating, why would they give us absolutely no opportunity to examine any of the detail? This is hardly the best way to cement a positive working relationship. Contrary to this, I would suggest that all members have been given the opportunity to scrutinise our ongoing response to the COVID crisis through regular overview and scrutiny committees, and will continue to be able to do so. I would also like to highlight that we discussed our transformation agenda and estates and regeneration strategies earlier in this council meeting and came to a cross-party consensus. This is a perfect example of our democratic process in action. So why is additional time needed for Cabinet to hear a single party's opinions? The Alliance has already shown real leadership in responding to the COVID crisis and shall continue to do so as we move into the restore, regeneration and recovery phase. Councillor Brown has just spoken eloquently about our consistent position of responsible, sustainable, flexible and responsive financial management. As an alliance, we welcome input and ideas from all members. However, this just seems to be another attempt to undermine the administration following the Conservatives' failed vote of no confidence last month. Finally, perhaps a polite request rather than a requirement for Cabinet to consider these proposals would be the way forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. Councillor Tony Trent. Councillor Trent, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm quite staggered at this range of proposals and counter proposals and so on. You wouldn't think actually that the Conservative opposition have got a majority on the overview and scrutiny board that considers everything that goes to Cabinet, and they make recommendations and Cabinet considers these recommendations. But what seems to be happening is every other pronouncement flips against the previous one. We have the thing on the building and borrowing and things like that. They seem to continually contradict themselves, and then they put something that said nothing, very glossy, but it said absolutely nothing, and then 16 minutes before I see in my inbox a little bit more detail on that. Well, you can't consider that detail that quickly. There's a point, and so certainly in the chat bars, about reduced number of scrutiny meetings and so on. Well, I too rather miss having detailed scrutiny. In fact, I think the way things were set up ahead of the formation of BCP Council, I think having just 3 scrutiny panels, to me, doesn't sort of cover things the way that I think they should do. You know, personally, I'd rather see something that involves members a lot more. But we are where we are, and the pandemic did cause things. There had to be streamlining to get through the whole pandemic thing and to operate with the what we can obviously see as the technical issues that we still have, you know, trying to do things online. And although I'm quite happy for their ideas to be talked about and discussed individually and fed in at the appropriate point. It just seems that this is more to do with a gimmick than actually anything that is trying to add to consensus. As I say, the ability to discuss these things exists already, and the fact that the Unity Alliance, being attacked as if it's like a single party administration consists of 7 different groups. So, we're quite happy to work together and so on. But I just really think this whole motion is crazy. But,
thank you very much, Councillor Trent. Councillor Cox, I believe you wish to speak. Councillor Cox.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, fellow councillors. I've taken a good long hard look at the Conservative motion. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I can hear you loud and clear. Thank you,
I took a good long hard look at the Conservative motion. Well, it wasn't really that long because it wasn't the motion wasn't or the detail wasn't there. There's a very disappointing lack of detail contained within the initial document, Reset for All. The so-called alternative budget response, when you take away the pictures, the logos and the spin, is completely devoid of any substance. Its sole message seemed to be, we're in a crisis, we think we know best, stop being mean to us and let us do it our way. This is not an alternative budget, this is the politics of the playground. I strongly believe that the Unity Alliance should listen and take on board positive suggestions from the opposition and from anyone else for that matter. And I wholeheartedly agree, for instance, that we should borrow more, no, harder and faster than at any time in our history. We must, however, use those borrowings not to cover shortfalls in income, but to invest in property, transport and other improvements which will yield dividends to our children in the future. That is, after all, good old-fashioned Keynesian economics. Now more than ever, politicians of all colours and none should come together for the benefit of all the residents. For the avoidance of doubt, I would support this this motion as well, but I would warn that if it's just another cheap power grab, then the chances of the Conservative Party and BCP being listened to will diminish even more. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. Councillor Anne Stribley. Councillor Stribley, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Can you hear me now? Just
Yes.
trying to unmute myself. There you go. I'm really disappointed with what I've heard so far. Councillor Brown read from a very well prepared speech saying absolutely nothing really, ending up saying, well, he did appreciate the fact that there should be consultation, but he wasn't prepared to consider any options or additions or changes. That seems to be rather like a closed mind. Likewise, I found Councillor Evans' response sarcastic, unpleasant, and again well prepared and read from as she gave her opinions. Things are different, and Councillor Trent, I think, has missed the point in that we did not have a meeting, the usual budget meeting in February, where alternatives can be presented, discussed, thought about and worked over. I am pleased to hear that at least some members opposite are inclined to perhaps at least give the appearance of listening at the next cabinet meeting, where perhaps some proposals might find favour. But I'm really disappointed in the manner of speaking of a number of the members. It's not worthy of this new council. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Stribley. Councillor Inigar, I noticed that you've typed in a request to speak, and so has Councillor Green. Councillor Inigar, would you be happy that Councillor Green spoke before you, as you are the seconder of the motion?
Yes, okay, Chair. Yes.
Thank you very much. Councillor Mike Green, please.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I mean, it does seem as though some members, and I certainly not Councillor Cox, by the way, seem to have either misunderstood or to possibly not even have read the motion that's before them. It is not asking people to support what is within the document about how the Conservatives might look at things differently. It's asking people to look at whether and how the changes in the budget that have taken place because of this pandemic should be debated and discussed. I'm going to support this motion, but I really wish that I didn't have to. I've been a member of 3 different unitary councils over the course of almost 20 years, but never once have I seen the sort of budgetary change that we had presented to Cabinet as a budget monitoring report last time, not being debated by all members as part of full council. In fact, I've seen very few budgets as a whole that have seen anything like this sort of amount of change going forward, which again would come to full council. But what we've got at the moment is this Cabinet, in what they tell us is the most open, transparent and inclusive administration ever, has denied 65 members, almost 90% of those who have been elected, an opportunity to have a say in the decision as to how that big change should take place. And I'm afraid to those that might suggest so, talking about them at a cabinet meeting as somebody who just makes a representation, or an overview and scrutiny meeting, that is not the same as making a decision. Pure and simply, we're talking about a £30 million change that should have come before full council. So I would ask all members to think really carefully before they vote on this item. We are talking about this budget, this massive budget rebase. And I think it's a great shame that this rather toothless motion is the only way that we can get anywhere close to having a full discussion about what should have happened, what might happen into the future. But I would ask each member to think about what your constituents would think. Would they want you to be included in the decision as to what to do with this massive change in the council, in their council tax money? If you do believe that, you should support this motion and allow other members and other ideas to come forward. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Green. I'm going to move on to Councillor Mike White. Councillor White, please.
Have you got me? Can you hear me?
Yes, Councillor White.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I mean, just very briefly, I think some members may be slightly missing the point here. I mean, the paper today is not intended as a definitive statement. It sets out a number of new ideas that we feel are worth exploring, and all we want is an opportunity to examine them further. Now, that seems to me entirely reasonable. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor White. Councillor Vicky Slade, and following Councillor Vicky Slade, I will then move back to Councillor Inigar, who's the seconder of the motion. Councillor Slade, please.
Thank you. I will keep it brief. I wasn't planning on speaking on this, but because there are members of the public and press listening to this meeting, I must correct a member earlier who seemed to suggest that there was no full budget meeting in February, and that there was no opportunity to debate a budget in February, and that there was no opportunity to put alternative budgets. There was. The opposition failed to put forward an alternative budget and simply looked to remove the additional spending in culture and community engagement and replace it with a couple of security officers. So I'm completely flummoxed as to why that comment was suggested. A full, responsible, balanced budget was presented in February, a matter of weeks before a global pandemic. The comment about why the councils have been denied the opportunity for a completely new look at the budget, I would just add there are over 300 councils in England. Only 20 are considering a budget. 280 plus are actually retaining their existing budget for one very good reason, and that is the budget gap is changing day by day, week by week. From the time that we came to the last overview and scrutiny board until the time of the last cabinet, the position had changed. Rishi Sunak is making a budget statement tomorrow that we expect will make further changes. There will be further changes that will affect our businesses, our culture. We're expecting a package that was announced at the weekend to help councils that have a high level of tourism. Every time we rewrote this budget, it would need to be rewritten again the following month. And the last thing I would just add is this paper, this expanded paper, which we're going to be taking forward if this motion passes, which apparently includes all of these great ideas. Very few of these ideas were suggested in February to form this revised budget, and very few of these ideas have come about as a result of the need for COVID-19. These are ideas that could easily have been put forward in February and were not. So I don't see this as being a sensible response to the COVID-19 situation. It's lacking in detail. In the half an hour or so I had to read it, I was incredibly disappointed by it. You know, I will leave members to decide whether they feel it is something that Cabinet should be spending more time on, but my view is every month Cabinet is already talking about our response to the COVID-19 pandemic. We are every month bringing forward the changes and amendments to the financial picture as it changes. To actually stop and do a complete review according to a different set of priorities in the middle of the year, to me, seems quite a strange thing to do.
Thank you, Leader. I'll now go back to Councillor Rinigar. Councillor Rinigar.
Thank you, Chairman. Just on a small point, the pronunciation is Iyengar, but thank you.
Iyengar, Councillor Iyengar, I do beg your pardon.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Sorry, could a colleague put their screen, turn their volume down, please? Pardon me, Chair, 1 second. Okay, is that, thank you. Sorry, can you go on?
Just go up to the end of the room.
Okay. All right, sorry, Chair. All this motion is asking is for the administration to consider the information that's put forward. One comment mentioned was that, I do apologise, sorry, there's absolute ringing, I do apologise for this. Can we sort this out? Okay, thank you. Right, let's crack on. One comment mentioned was about it was available to the Overview and Scrutiny Board, which is correct. Of course, as we know, the Overview and Scrutiny Board is a multi-hour marathon with a huge number of items with it. So therefore, it got the amount of sort of coverage that is appropriate for one of probably more than about 15 items at the ONS. But yes, it was covered there. Cabinet, came to Cabinet, there's a chance to mention it there. And yes, I did. And of course, for 3 minutes. And that's what you get. So I'm just trying, my comment here is actually about literally not the fact that we've had a chance to input into this, but literally the limited scope to be able to do that, given the importance of what we're talking about. The comments that I've heard, I'm just trying to be quite circumspect about this, is that we're getting a lot of procedure thrown at us with many of the comments. And goodness me, as someone who, you know, with about 30 years experience of managing change, God, it reminds me how difficult it is to manage change sometimes. And the first response is always to get procedure thrown at you. It's been described as cheap. Okay. It's described as glossy, but obviously in a disparaging way, as if there's something, you know, sort of awful about presenting something the way we did. People are disappointed, etc., etc. As everyone knows, or many people will know in the administration, putting together, when you're not the administration, putting together a budget, putting together some offering with only limited access to a number of people is quite a challenge. So please, you know, sort of, I think some of those comments should have been tempered rather. Okay, Once again, all we're asking is for this to be considered. That's all that we're asking for with this. I will remark on a couple of things on the theme of how difficult it is to get attention and to get even the simplest ideas accepted at the moment. Transformation, for instance, which our group leader has commented on. I defy please anybody in the administration to say that the use of the word transformation and the general oomph behind transformation has not increased in the past month, in the past 5 to 6 weeks, given recent events that our group have actually spurred the administration to do. Believe me, before then, I had not heard transformation said very, very often. Now suddenly we're seeing a lot of it. The second thing is cabinet members' presence, and of course I'll get breakbacks about this. The presence of cabinet members is now distinctly higher in the last 4 weeks than we've seen hitherto. Wonder why that is. Okay, the Chancellor's statement is coming tomorrow, and we've got huge, uncertainty around COVID. More than ever, I think this is a signal, a request, a flag from us that maybe a certain amount of openness and a certain sort of, less sort of dissension, less knee-jerk sort of sneering at ideas from others. It may be a good time to consider that. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Iyengar. Councillor Broadhead, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think one of the things we can all agree with as we emerge from the COVID crisis is that we find ourselves in stark times with some stark challenges in front of us. In my view, I think perhaps the greatest of those challenges is trying to balance the dual responsibilities that we face at the moment of dealing directly and responsibly with the impact, the financial impacts in particular that the crisis had on the council, but also the duty that we all have collectively together to ensure that our area, our economy and our residents bounce back stronger than ever. Now, no one has all of the answers to this. I certainly don't, the administration won't, the officers and staff of the council won't, but together pooling ideas we might. And I think that is very much the spirit of the motion that's in front of us today. It's not a vote on a different plan, it's a vote on throwing other ideas and experience into the mix for consideration. Now, as others have mentioned, if this motion is passed, it's quite within Cabinet's gift to say thank you very much for the ideas, but we don't like any of them. Now, I sincerely hope they don't. I hope that we're all grown up enough to accept good ideas no matter where they come from. But at the very least, we should consider them. Now, I'm not going to rattle on about why we're having to bring this motion forward. We've established other councils around the country are by default enabling automatic consideration of alternate budget suggestions by taking such big budget decisions through full council, often by way of emergency budget. And contrary to the leader's suggestion, more and more are doing those by the day. In my mind, that's still the fairest and most democratic way to make such large decisions, because this is the largest in-year budget revision in living memory. But the administration chose to do it that way, and that's an argument for another day. I think the argument that we have today, the motion in front of us, should not be an argument. The document that was released earlier was just a flavour of other ideas that Cabinet could consider. It gives credible ways to increase our expenditure on such things as climate change, tourism and the economy, in contrast to the cuts that are in the proposals. So let's consider other ideas, not refuse them. Let's involve councillors and not exclude them, because this motion is not in any way condoning any idea. It's just an acceptance that we all have ideas, we're all elected and we should listen to them all. So I strongly urge all councillors to support this motion. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Broadhead. Councillor Nicola Green, please. Councillor Green.
Thank you, Chairman, and I apologise for the halo that's just appeared behind me. I really don't mean anything by it, but the light has faded. I just wanted to comment on Councillor Brown's view that the Overview and Scrutiny Board perhaps didn't take a very serious view of this. It did. It spent a lot of time on the paper, and it did make a recommendation expressing surprise and disappointment that such a substantial rebase of the budget of the council wasn't to be put before all elected councillors. The recommendation to Cabinet was that the revised budget, as outlined in the Cabinet report, be put before full council in the normal fashion for a budget decision. Now, let's be clear, the much vaunted priorities from Councillor Brown's budget speech in February were swept aside with very little explanation, including those relating to climate change, street cleansing, unauthorised encampments, highways maintenance, culture and regeneration, together with £4 million in health and adult social care during a pandemic, and nigh on £1 million from children's services was barely a whisper. This motion naturally doesn't set out the full detail of proposals which are to come, but it is a request for broad participation, really for all members' views to be considered, and it's a plea for engagement and for the very best options to be taken forward. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Green. If there are no further speakers, may I call upon Councillor Howell, please.
Yes, I'd like to take exception about that, how this has been presented, really. Certainly in my portfolio, the door is always open for any member to come and speak to me, and I've actually encouraged people consistently to come and speak to me, suggest ideas, and I'm sure that's the same for my colleagues. You know, I'd like to comment a bit on the paper, but the substance of the paper was only delivered into my inbox by the Leader of the Opposition at 4 o'clock today. You know, that it is at the end of the day, if we're going to work together, you know, we need to, you know, to work to give people timely information and give people an opportunity to, you know, fairly to contribute, and that just hasn't happened tonight because certain members of the opposition have been raising particular points on subject matter that we can't really comment on because we weren't given the details, the substance of their paper. We're very happy to consider this paper, I'm sure, but and other ideas, but you know, we need to really, you know, accept that we've got to working together actually means working together and sharing ideas. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Howell. I have a request to speak from Councillor Mark Anderson. Councillor Anderson, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I would just like to correct Councillor Howell on his comments because I think he's missed the point. What the motion is about getting the Cabinet to look at a budget and alternative suggestions from the Conservative group. It's not putting forward a budget at this point in time. We were asked to put forward a paper by the monitoring officer to support our motion. If we hadn't been, there wouldn't be a paper. So there is more detail provided than we necessarily had to. So I think it's what we're asking for, not what we're saying at this point in time.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Councillor Diana Butler. Councillor Butler, please.
Yes, I'd just like to say that the Conservatives had actually put the papers within our whole lot of 280 pages of restricted agenda. They actually appear on that, which we did get before today. So it was included for people to read. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. Councillor Stephen Bartlett. Councillor Bartlett, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Having listened to the debate so far, it seems that some members of the administration have accepted that it's a good idea to listen to other people's ideas. There's been a lot of criticism about how late the information's been presented, and I would agree with that. It would have been better to have received it earlier, so we could have studied it. But nevertheless, the essence of the motion is that, yes, we've got some ideas. Can you listen to it? Now, nobody has the monopoly on good ideas, and I think Councillor Brown has accepted that he's prepared to listen. I think Councillor Howes has just said he's prepared to listen. The issues about the manner in which it's been done and the criticism going from one side to the other is really a distraction, and that's about just the difference in party politics. Now, I'm an independent, and what I'd just like to see is that we do accept that other people do have good ideas, and they should be considered, because at the end of the day, it's the best ideas that will be in the interest of our residents, and that's what we should be doing. So I will support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bartlett. Members, can I ask if there's any further member wishing to speak? If not, I'll ask Councillor Mellor to sum up. Can members please show in the instant message bar? Thank you, members, in which case I will call on Councillor Mellor to sum up for members, please. Councillor Mellor.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the opportunity to do that. You know, a really heartfelt disappointment on my behalf here. What a negative response to an opportunity to do cross-party working. You know, again, we've heard from the administration, the alliance, that effectively, you know, they're not comfortable about bringing other ideas forward. The leader says quite clearly that many councils across the country are putting a budget paper forward, but this no overall control council that commends itself as being, I think, as Councillor Green said, open, transparent, and inclusive, has been anything but that. If we look through this, no councillor has been asked to vote on this, none. Cabinet have only been asked to note this. No scrutiny from health or children's committees or engagement with their members. What has been the engagement with their members? This hasn't been brought to full council. We've heard again about 7 groups being part of the alliance. But how many have contributed to this? Effectively, I didn't want to be talking about that this evening because, as many members have said, this motion has got nothing to do with either the paper we put forward or effectively why we've got to this point. It's asking for us to genuinely look for cross-party working. I'll correct a couple of inaccuracies. There's no borrowing in our proposals to fund service provision. This is cash we already have, and we're just illustrating a way we could spend differently to then re-engage with our priorities, both priorities that you purport to represent and cancelled, wholeheartedly. In terms of a detail point, the opportunity to present an alternative budget has been denied to us. That's a statement of fact. We were led to believe that was the case. We have detailed proposals sitting behind these, but we aren't able to bring them to council. So the right opportunity is to take that through a proper process, through overview and scrutiny, through cabinet. So we can provide the detail, we can work through the detail with members. But the crux of this motion is: do you choose to accept and want cross-party working, or do you choose to deny it? And that's in its simplest form. This is a clear attempt to work cross-party. It's also a clear attempt to say what this administration has failed to do is to provide leadership at this point out of this crisis. We have the opportunity, we have a need, and we have the ambition to do more, and we want to be part of this debate, and we believe every 75 members on this council should be part of that debate. So I commend effectively this motion to our councillor group. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mellor. I will now go to the vote, and I will ask if there is any dissension with regard to the motion that's just been tabled, please. I have 1 abstention from Councillor Trent. Can I just ask once more if any member wishes to show their dissent or abstain from voting on this item, please show in the instant messaging column. In which case, members, I have 1 abstention and that motion is carried. Thank you, members. Members, I will now move on to the last item on this evening's agenda, questions from councillors. Can I call firstly on Councillor Cox, please? I understand you have a question to put to Councillor Felicity Wright. Rice regarding hedgerow management. Councillor Cox?
Yes, unfortunately I haven't got it in front of me, but can I take it as read?
As in the papers.
As in the papers?
I can tell you what it is. Hang on, you can have it.
Just bear with me, Councillor Cox, I have it.
Here it is. Councillor Cox is getting it.
Can I please ask the responsible cabinet member to review hedgerow management? After recent cutbacks by the council in Purewell, the scene left behind was one of devastation. Whilst I accept there is some cutting back is required for safety reasons, the mechanical flailing left a scene of destruction with twigs and splintered wood scattered everywhere, saying nothing of it occurring in the middle of the bird nesting season. There must be a better way of looking after our environment, such as leaving areas for wilding and the planting of wildflower beds on the road verges. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. Councillor Felicity Rice, please. Councillor Rice?
Yep. Thank you for the question. The works at Purewell were purely operational as the vegetation had started to grow out into the pavement to such an extent that it forced pedestrians close to the road, creating an urgent safety issue. Therefore, a tractor-mounted flail was used due to the length and thickness of the vegetation, which inevitably does cause some split ends. However, these will green up very quickly. Please be assured that staff checked for bird nesting prior to carrying out any of this work. The council, through the Environment Services Parks team, are working towards a new approach to verge management in order to enhance the natural regeneration of wildflower meadows over a managed and sustained period of time. This was outlined in a paper brought to Cabinet in March called the Grass Cutting Wildflower and Grassland Habitat Management Policy. This does outline a range of activities to promote wildlife, including changes to mowing regimes, frequencies, denitrification via cut and collect to promote natural wildflower development and the seeding and development of additional annual wildflower meadows. This year's reduction in grass cutting due to operational restriction imposed on us through COVID-19 has also highlighted how wildlife and wildflowers can take advantage if we are prepared to change our normal working practices. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rice. Councillor Cox, did you have a supplementary question at all?
No supplementary, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. I'd like to move on then to Councillor Ball. I understand you have a question to put to Councillor Vicky Slade on diversity. Councillor Ball, please.
Yes, Chair, thank you, and congratulations on your re-election. My question is to the Council. How is the Council addressing the Council's perceived and indeed actual lack of diversity within the workforce at all levels? What measures, such as anonymising job applications before shortlisting, are in place?
Thank you, Councillor Ball, for that question. It's very timely. The Strategic Equalities Leadership Group is setting up a working group to review how the Council will ensure effective and long-term inclusivity and engagement with our Black, Asian and minority ethnic staff and our residents and visitors. The group will involve a range of council and community representatives and particularly focus on understanding the barriers to achieve a more diverse workforce. It is expected that the working group, along with the Strategic Equalities Leadership Group, will hold the Council to account by monitoring progress against our people strategy and our equality and diversity commitments that were approved last year. BCP Council's people strategy and the diversity plan include a number of actions to celebrate diversity and put in place measures to establish a more representative council workforce. Our current recruitment and selection procedures are fair and robust, but they are not delivering a workforce that is truly representative, and we need to do more. There are a number of actions that we plan to take, including more accurately measuring the data on our diversity. We've inherited incomplete equalities data, and we need to address that to know where our baseline is. We're reviewing HR policies, which will include consideration of anonymisation of personal data for shortlisting purposes. We're introducing unconscious bias training, which will be mandatory for all employees, improving and targeting our communications, including those related to recruitment activities, to more effectively reach potential candidates from BAME communities who may have deselected themselves as potential council employees due to our imagery, marketing, social media and recruitment channels. And we're using our council's Equalities Champion network to build employee groups to better represent minority groups. We will also be designing and developing a BCP Council talent and succession process that can support and accelerate the development of lesser represented employees.
Thank you, Leader. Councillor Ball, did you have a supplementary question at all?
I did, but it's been fully answered in the reply from Councillor Slade. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I call on Councillor Butler? I understand you have a question to put to Councillor Hadley on the experimental TRO at Poole Quay. Councillor Butler, please.
Yes. Why has an experimental traffic regulation order been used to close Poole Quay for 18 months to motor vehicles without prior consultation with the public, all councillors, motorbike event supporters and people with disabilities?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Butler. On the 9th of May, the Secretary of State, Grant Shapps, made an announcement urging councils to consider pinch points and locations to assist with social distancing in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, and in particular, given the restrictions on travel by public transport, to encourage walking and cycling. This required local authorities to follow an accelerated process of 4 weeks to commence work and 8 weeks to complete temporary measures. This precluded the consultation process that we're all used to. So I wrote to all 75 BCP councillors on the following day, 10th of May, inviting suggestions for widening pavements, giving protected space for cycling and the development of low traffic neighbourhoods. This was also shared through the Leaders' Facebook live sessions with the public. We were not advised until the 27th of May that BCP Council had an indicative award based on the 2011 Public Transport to Work census journey data of £280,000. We have had over 1,000 suggestions from members of the public and ward councillors, and the officers prioritised 14 schemes based on pavement width and congestion risk. The lower section of Poole High Street and Poole Quay scored highly and was therefore included in that list of priority proposals back to the Department of Transport. The confirmation of the funding granted to us by the Department of Transport was on the 25th of June, and they awarded us £315,000, recognising a good submission. We had a 13% uplift on our ask. The government guidance proposed the use of experimental traffic regulation orders, which involve a 7-day advance notice, but we did additionally write out to many stakeholders. Making the change starts the consultation process, which will be reviewed over the months ahead. An equalities impact assessment was undertaken. The disabled parking bays by Sea Music are being re-provided across the road with full-width bays. They're currently substandard without space for opening doors. New motorcycle bays have been marked at the roundabout, and once the events are restarted, the road will be opened for the events like Bike Night instead of being closed for them. We met with a number of the businesses in the week leading up to the change to hear their concerns, and officers made changes to the scheme in response to this. We now have a live consultation available over the next 6 months, and by using the experimental route, we can adjust the scheme in that time, although material changes would reset that 6-month clock. The legislation gives us 18 months before an experimental TRO has to either be reverted or replaced by permanent measures, including that consultation. Members of the public can provide feedback via our website. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hadley. Councillor Butler, did you have a supplementary at all?
Yes, I did. The regulation order is for 18 months, which is an awfully long time. COVID hopefully won't last too long. So, you know, I wonder whether businesses in the area are going to really suffer the impact of potential loss of business and income, especially with the motorbike events. And also people may be dropping off people at the at various points along the way. So really, has the impact on businesses and motorbike events been taken into consideration for the short term, medium term and long term during the 18 months?
Thank you. Well, as I responded in my answer, we expect to review over the 6-month period. Effectively, the legislation allows for an 18-month period for an experimental TRO, but we'd expect to review within 6 months and decide what we do for the longer term. In terms of the motorbike events and all other events, those have been cancelled to the end of August, and when those restart, we will be able to accommodate special events on the quay as before. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hadley. The next question is from Councillor Rigby, who I understand is a question for Councillor Rice. Councillor Rigby, please.
Thank you, Chair. Let me just find it. Yeah, thank you.
Excuse me, a request.
Do you want me to continue, Chair?
No, unfortunately, Councillor, but there is no opportunity to speak on these items. This is a question from the councillor to the portfolio holders, who then give the answer. What I would suggest, Councillor Butt, is if you have a question or query on the last question, then it may well be that you question Councillor Hadley outside of this meeting. I'm sorry about that, but that is the protocol. Councillor Rigby, please proceed.
Thank you. This council meeting marks a full year since we voted almost unanimously to declare a climate and ecological emergency, and 6 months since the publication of the draft action plan. Could I ask the portfolio holder for the environment and climate change to provide an update on what actions have been undertaken in relation to this declaration and draft plans so far, and also what plans are in place for creating the Citizens' Assembly on the topic? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rigby. Councillor Rice, please.
Hello. Yes, thank you, Councillor Rigby. Overall, I am pleased to say that in the past year, the Council has been commended by both the Local Government Association and the Association for Public Service Excellence for our response following our climate and ecological emergency declaration. We are also one of 5 UK towns and cities praised as global climate leaders by carbon disclosure charity CDP, and we are on their city's A-list. We have also had national recognition that we have redesigned the Wessex Fields development site so that the focus is fundamentally switched towards sustainable and healthy forms of transport, which is of course particularly relevant given the enthusiasm from Bournemouth Hospital to enable their staff to be healthy and for the whole population to be able to breathe cleaner air. We have a long list of actions which is available on our climate action page. However, a few actions to mention are incorporating the United Nations Sustainability Development Goals throughout our corporate strategy, the development of the Decision Impact Assessment Tool, enabling all projects, decisions and policies to be assessed against sustainability criteria going forwards, fundamental change by incorporating sustainable procurement in the Council's new financial regulations. We've had climate change presentations to staff and councillors by Al Gore's Climate Reality Project. We now purchase green electricity from renewable sources for our buildings and streetlights. This saves over 7,000 tonnes of carbon dioxide each year, whilst at the same time we are also looking at opportunities to develop our own renewable energy sources for the longer term. We have also got electric vehicle charging points been installed at council depots, and an electric refuse collection vehicle and road sweepers are to be trialled. We've had 691 households been referred to the Local Energy Advice Partnership, generating carbon savings and £770,000 worth in energy reduction bills. We've engaged with schools through the Council's Leave Only Footprints, and the Youth Parliament is also leading campaigns on environmental issues. There was a planned Young People's Summit that was due to be held in June. However, this has been this will now be held as a series of virtual events throughout the summer. An internal climate action champions network is being launched on the first anniversary of the declaration to engage all staff in making carbon reductions. A couple of recent things have been that the council funded a barrel bike scheme for key workers during the pandemic with 1,000 essential journeys made by barrel bike. The council has, as we were just hearing, the council has been successful in its recent £280,000 bid for the government emergency active travel grant, and this has been mentioned in national transport workshops. Staff are now being surveyed on their experience during the pandemic of working from home, so that we can aid the introduction of new ways of working to decrease commuting and work-related travel. You also asked about the Citizens' Assembly. So a Citizens' Assembly is where a randomly selected proportion of society is brought together within BCP to understand in depth and discuss and debate various aspects of climate change action. By involving a cross-section of society and allowing time for informed decision-making, it is similar to the process of jury duty, which is recognised around the world as being one of the best ways of making important decisions. This was originally planned for May 2020. However, this is also postponed until it is safe to convene the required sample of residents at a venue over multiple days. Our community engagement campaign has also been delayed due to COVID-19, but this will now be launched at the end of July. This will gather the views of residents on climate change and the proposed actions that they would prioritise from our draft plan and the actions that they would be prepared to undertake themselves. A report detailing all our actions and emissions reductions since approval of the draft action plan will be presented to Council in December. As a consequence of COVID-19, we have all seen the dramatic changes that our society has been through. And although many of these changes have been forced upon us in a negative way, a YouGov survey found that only 9% of the population wanted life to return to normal after lockdown, citing cleaner air, more wildlife, and stronger communities. Lockdown was hugely different for everyone, and still is. However, many of the aspects that the public appreciated during lockdown were all in keeping with actions on tackling the climate and wildlife crisis. It presents an opportunity for us all to imagine a different future. And we know now that dramatic change is possible, but we need to take charge of that change and manage it in a positive and active way. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rice, for that comprehensive reply. Councillor Rigby, did you have a supplementary at all?
No, thank you. That was a really full answer. Just thank you to Councillor Rice, and I look forward to seeing the paper in December.
Thank you very much. And finally, we have a question from Councillor Brooks, who I understand has a question to Councillor Rice once more regarding transit sites.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, members, for staying the course. In September 2013, the preceding councils of Bournemouth, Poole and Dorset commissioned and received a gypsy and traveller and travelling show people accommodation assessment from Opinion Research Services. The report concluded that extra pitches were required in each of the 5-year periods in 2013 to 2028. Every year since 2013, residents have seen summer incursions of travellers onto council-owned land across the conurbation, resulting in disruption, antisocial behaviour and extensive waste, resulting in an ever-increasing cost to the council. The vast majority of travellers are law-abiding citizens, but illegal sites often give an unfair, negative impression of their community and cause distress and misery to those who live nearby, as seen on BBC South recently. My question: what action is BCP Council going to take to put in place transit sites to tackle the annual influx of travellers to our area? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brooks. Councillor Felicity Rice, please. Councillor Rice.
Yep, thank you for the question. The planning needs for transit provision in the future will be reviewed as part of the evidence for the emerging BCP local plan. The current evidence set out in the 2017 Gypsy and Traveller and Travelling Show People Accommodation Assessment, the GTTAA, concludes that the need for transit provision should be monitored over time, looking at the numbers of unauthorised incursions and considered against an approach on ongoing management measures. The GTTAA study will be updated to support the BCP local plan to consider this issue further, and will link up with the ongoing work of the cross-party member working group, which I chair, which is restarting this month, that will consider how best to address this issue for the BCP area going forwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rice. Councillor Brooks, did you have a supplementary at all?
Thank you, Councillor Felicity. Can I just say, we did briefly speak about this earlier this afternoon, and I do appreciate the work that's been done currently to address this ongoing problem year in, year out. Can I just please ask that this matter doesn't get kicked into the long grass, and that we do actually see some positive options as to how we can tackle this problem? Thank you.
Councillor Rice, did you wish to respond?
Yes, just to say that I take this aspect of the portfolio incredibly seriously, and the cabinet really want to lead on this work. So I appreciate your support and look forward to progressing with this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Rice. Members, there being no further business to conduct, I declare this evening's meeting closed at 22:22. Please keep your microphones set to mute until Mr. Jones advises us that the streaming has been completed. Thank you.